Hey folks, Fernando doing our video for More Survivalist, and please do stick around for this video. It's going to be one of those longer ones that I do every once in a while. It's maybe one of the more important ones I've done in the last few months. I usually do different things, reviewing something or talking about a specific topic. This is one of those in which I'm going to be going through a bunch of stuff that, no doubt whatsoever, if you're watching this channel at all, you are likely interested. And I'm talking about preparing for what's coming in the United States, maybe what's coming in other parts of the world as well, especially the United States, given all the political stuff we've been talking about. And by the way, we're going to be doing tomorrow the show with Matt Bracken, 3 p.m. As usual. But if that is in the least something that interests you, stick around for this video. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been doing this, I started with my own experience back in the day when, while still living in Argentina, when things got very difficult over there, back in 2001. And I went through more than 10 years of living with the kind of crap you're very likely to see in the immediate future. Your country is turning into something different, something that you don't understand, something that you've never seen before. It's simply a fact. You've never seen this Venezuela American version of itself. It's just something that it's completely outside what you normally come across. The experience you've had so far is very different from what you're going to see in the coming years, and it's not going to be easy. A lot of the fantasies regarding how you deal with this stuff will just fall apart. People that thought they knew their stuff will realize not so much. A lot of the things that supposedly were intended to keep you safe during these times just doesn't work. And it's a lot of the stuff that I told you for years that just doesn't work, because I know that it doesn't work for that kind of situation when your country goes down in this madness of political upheaval, left-wing authoritarian type regime, along with a crappy economy, hell of a mess. You end up realizing what works and what doesn't. And for years I've been telling people that if that's the kind of thing you want to prepare for, a bunch of this stuff that you've been told is useful and will be successful and will give you an edge, not so much, not really. It works very well. Well, it doesn't happen. This is like, you've probably seen that episode. I mentioned this a bunch of times. You've probably seen that episode in The Simpsons where Lisa sells Homer, lion-repelling rock. She picks up a rock and she tries to make the point, look, there's no lions around, so I'm going to be selling you this rock that keeps lions away. So it's a lion-repellent rock. And Homer, being stupid and all, he just buys the rock from Lisa. Point being, it's easy to have lion-repellent rocks or criminal-repelling stones or whatever when there's no lions and no criminals around. It's easy to sell a fantasy of what you need to do when your country goes down into Venezuela-like political disaster and horrible economic crisis when there's not one to deal with. It's a very different story when there is one. And yes, these are all different. I've been doing this for many years. I've had my experience in Argentina. It was not fun. I just went along with it like millions of others did, and made the best of it and learned a bunch along the way, prepared as best as I could. I think I've been quite successful at that, and I've made this, this is my profession for the last, how many years. It's something I've been evolving over the years as well. I just didn't stick with my own experience. I've been learning and learning from other people's experiences as well, and exchanging information. And when I talk with people from Venezuela, I see the similarities. When I talk with people from, when I talk with Salco in the Balkans, we talk about the similarities and differences. So this is something I've been doing for many years now. So it's not just first-hand personal experience. It's also about this process that never ends. This is something that over the years, especially with people that know their stuff, these are the first ones who tell you, I never stop learning. And my firearms instructor from back in Argentina, who by the way won the national championship in his category in senior, and he ended up in third place in the general, so congratulations to Jorge for that. Still giving classes, still kicking ass, still being a fantastic instructor with over 30 years of being the chief instructor of the Buenos Aires police and head of complex crimes. Fantastic guy. But he says, sometimes teacher, always a student. You never stop learning, and that's what makes these folks so special. The kind of folks that will always have the humility of, I never stop learning, I never stop evolving. That has to be your case as well. So what I mean by all this is you're getting your feet into waters you've never seen before, and you had a taste of it so far this year with all the BLM riots, all the political stuff we've been talking all year now. All the stuff you've been seeing, there's the pandemic there in the middle, but mostly the political change in the United States is even bigger than the pandemic. It's going to be having consequences that you just cannot envision. There's no way you could possibly do that. It's just so different from what you're used to. Maybe if you lived in some of these states, if you lived in California, you live in New York, you kind of see the socialist, commie, left-wing thing going on. But it's different while the rest of the country is still afloat and you have these specific areas where all of this is going down. It's different when it's the entire country going down in this. There's no lifeboat left. It's the entire thing. It's the entire ship sinking. It's not just a bit of water in some areas. It's all over. So it's going to be quite different. Going to be going through like 10 points, and these are not in any specific order. How important they are, it's going to be depending on your own specifics. It may be for some person it may be one thing, for someone else it may be the other. I guess the first thing I would say is start preparing. If you haven't started preparing already, you have to get your preps in order right now. And by this I mean the basic stuff you probably already know of, in terms of having your supplies, having your food and water sorted out, having your means of lighting when power goes down, having flashlights, your kits, your EDC stuff that I talked about in the channel so many times, different packs for your house, your vehicles, basic stuff regarding preparedness, which by the way, it's the stuff I cover in my latest book, Street Survival Skills. I always promote it in my channel. Of course, that's part of having a channel. It's promoting my own work. So Street Survival Skills, it's really the thing I recommend for people getting started in all of this. And if you are a little bit more advanced, I'm pretty sure you're going to be learning good stuff as well, because this is the latest book based on not only first-hand experience in Argentina, where I got started with my first book, The Modern Survival Manual, still doing great. I was just checking in Amazon, people still loving it. So The Modern Survival Manual, Street Survival Skills. Specifically, this one is the one that's going to be giving you the practical stuff that not only is based on what I went through in Argentina, but years later still learning and having more and more experience and added knowledge. But again, back to this first point, you got to sort this out. You have to get your preps ready, because now is when you're more likely to end up needing them. It just goes into every little aspect of preparedness. I'll just give you an example. One of the things I talk about here is, besides a lot of stuff regarding self-defense, firearms, and kits and all that, one of the things I talk about is closing a cut, a wound, with super glue. Stuff you probably read many times in online or saw videos of. Well, I actually ended up doing that with my 2-year-old at the beginning of the pandemic, when the corpses were piling up, when people were not leaving their homes, you were basically on a full lockdown, because this was the first the peak of the first wave. My 2-year-old falls down the stairs, hits the face against the marble floor, cuts like a boxer cut, cuts down right to the bone. Pretty big cut, actually, maybe a little bit too big, but man, it had to be done. Cleaned it with glue, sealed it shut, and it's not all that pretty, but the kid is doing okay. He has definitely a scar there, which may have been a little bit better, or may have been a little bit worse if it had gotten stitches, depending on how good the hand of the one doing the stitching could have been. But it was a solution for that problem, and he has just like a little line, and it works. It's the kind of stuff that ends up happening when you have little incidents, bigger accidents, or worse stuff. But you have to get your preps in order. Following up with that, the thing that if you ask anyone in Argentina, or you ask anyone in Venezuela, or anyone in a crappy socialist country, keeping it real, that's exactly how it ends up turning into. The two things that concern people the most is crime and the economy. Being shot is realistically a big concern, and of course the horrible economy with the out of control inflation is definitely a concern as well. But the second point would be worrying about crime, worrying about getting hurt. You're seeing this with the BLMs, Antifas, and that's just the start. I want you guys to understand that this is not going to be ending now that you have Uncle Joe there about to take his place there in the White House. This is just getting started, and it's not going to be getting better anytime soon. Already the left wings, the different left wing groups that basically allowed him to reach this position through different methods, even through violence on the street and threatening with more violence. It's been my experience that these groups are never satiated. It's never enough for them. They're already asking, biting for positions, within the government, power, different areas of the government in which they want to have positions of power, and they're going to be getting that. They already got that. It's not going to be enough for them. They will want more and more. This is the way socialism works. It is very effective. It's like a virus that once it enters a system, it spreads throughout the entire body until it fully infiltrates it. So now that they have already their hands in it, they're not going to be letting it go. And it's going to be getting into every single aspect of government, and through that, every single aspect of life. One of those is going to be crime, violence on the street. All of a sudden, tables will be turned, as you've already seen it, and the arsonist and looter all of a sudden is a political activist. It's going to be the same when someone breaks into your house and you end up getting shot, or you end up shooting someone in self-defense, or it attacks, he goes after a family member, someone gets murdered, someone gets raped. But no, that is not a murderer or a rapist or a thief. That is a political activist that has problems or whatever, and he's actually the poor victim of the evil capitalist American empire. That's how it ends up being turned. So expect more people being released out of prison way sooner than they should be. Expect sentences to become lower and lower. Expect these people to have more power, these criminals, these thugs, to be on their side, because that's what they are, and they will have to show support for their people. That's been the way in Argentina. It's been the way in Venezuela. You see criminals on the street and you see them becoming politicized. All of a sudden, he's no longer a rapist. He's no longer a murderer. He's no longer a robber, a home invader. He's also a political activist, and that's going to be giving him leverage, especially in some of the states where they have more support. But expect this to become more widespread, and A side effect of all this is that bad guys in general become emboldened. They have more support. They feel more empowered. They are empowering these poor, abused minorities, which are in fact, what I'm describing here. There's nothing. They're not exactly victims. Quite the opposite. But they feel empowered by this government. And that makes life worse for you. If you're an honest, law-abiding citizen, you will be out there in the streets with criminals feeling like, yeah, this is our thing. Look at what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. They went after him in spite of being armed. They just couldn't take it that this kid would not let himself be beaten to death. So after shooting one, the other two still went after him. So 3 guys going after him, not computing in their brains, not understanding that someone was not going to be letting just them beat the crap out of him and kill him. They just thought they had the right to do that. I'm serious about this. They believe they have the right to beat someone to death if they feel like it, because they are empowered. They are made to believe that they have more power and that they should be allowed to get away with this. Expect this to happen a lot more. And man, I could talk about just this point for a couple of hours, but I want to go over other stuff as well. My point here with this is crime will get a lot worse than it already is, and you're going to be put in positions of having to test what you believe you know. So in terms of your carry gun, do you have something that's actually capable of defending yourself when 2, 3, 4, 5 guys come after you? Maybe that little pocket gun with 9 rounds is not enough. Maybe you want to have your Glock 19 or your Glock 17. Are you actually knowledgeable enough? Do you have the training so as to run that gun efficiently if it ever comes down to that? It may well be or may not be the case. There's been instances in which people with very limited training or no training at all have been successful, but it's not the kind of thing that usually holds through time when things get to this level. When it becomes even more trying, more difficult out there, the more you will need to train and have the right tool for this kind of situation. When during normal times, the bar is set quite low, so anything you do so as to defend yourself, it's likely to be enough. As things get worse, that bar keeps going up, and your level of training, your level of proficiency needs to be up to that. Now, regarding the economy, same thing. It's do you think it's bad right now? Maybe not. Maybe you think things are just fine. But if you're struggling, expect to struggle a lot more as the country starts losing credibility, as these commies take control of everything and they wreck the economy. If there's one thing commies and socialists and these left-wing liberal nutcases are good at, is wrecking the economy. That is one of the main definite factors of socialism, is that they do a wonderful job at wrecking the economy, inflation going through the roof, the country basically losing credibility, and the currency, because this is all about faith. The faith in that currency is lost. The ability to sustain itself in the market, it's no longer there, and people just start distrusting the currency of that country more and more. Happened in Argentina, happened in Venezuela. You're talking about the 2 of the top 5 or top 10 countries with the worst inflation on the planet. All right, it's always the same thing. Socialism going to be bringing along inflation and even hyperinflation as well. You watch some of my older videos, read my books. It's a stuff of nightmares how it wrecks a country, society in general, when money just melts in your pocket. It's losing value 5-10% a year, 10% a month, 50% a year. What is it in Venezuela? Like 1 million%. I mean, it's really worth nothing. People in Venezuela make like $3 a month, and it's not enough to buy a can of tuna in their own economy, right? A can of tuna is more expensive in Venezuela than it is in the United States, and a guy making an average income is not enough to buy a single can of it. How do you survive on that? Well, talk with people from Venezuela. They will tell you they just have to improvise an entire parallel economy. They have to make money on the side. They have to make money in dollars as to survive, because their own economy is a complete disaster. It's basically non-existent. This is the kind of thing that you just have no idea how to navigate, because it's not your reality. It is the reality of the guy in Venezuela who understands that with the his actual salary, his actual wage is not enough to sustain himself. So he has to find alternative methods so as to get around that. It is very complex, it's very difficult, but it's something that you definitely want to keep in mind, because how bad it will get or not, we'll see. How fast it will go down, we'll see as well. But it's something that you should be expecting. Expect inflation, expect a serious economic crisis sooner or later. Moving on. Yeah, the next point, keeping your views to yourself. Now, here I talk about this all the time, so it's kind of contradictory. I'm talking about my own views. Sure, when you do this, when you put your face out there, when you have a channel, when you become an author, and you're exposed to this, but this doesn't mean that you should be doing the same as well. And in fact, in my private life, I come across people, far more likely than not, they have no idea who I am, what I do. So this is one of those things where I just keep my mouth shut up all the time regarding these things. When you're, talking with people around you, neighbors, parents from school, and all that stuff, you're going to be getting to the point where, and you're already seeing that a lot of the things I'm talking about here, you're already seeing how people lose their jobs. People have already lost their jobs for what they say in social media, especially people that have some, famous people, actors, or I think that someone in sports got fired because of what his wife said. Not even himself. His wife said something against BLM that, all lives matter or something like that. How many jobs have been lost because someone said, yeah, I think that all lives matter, and that boom, immediately you get fired. So you'll have to learn to just keep it to yourself. Is this the best the best thing to do, so as to keep the message alive and fight the good fight and all? No, well, but you have to be smart about it. That's what I mean with this point. It's going to be getting a lot trickier. So you'll have to know when to speak, when you make your opinions public, or when to talk, rather than making your opinions public, when to talk to the right people, because that's going to be helping what you want to achieve in terms of change, of having people, or maybe even connecting for your own interest with like-minded people. And when you really should keep your mouth shut, because expressing your views will achieve nothing but to get you in trouble, get you fired, get your kids gone after in school by a liberal teacher. This is the kind of thing that ends up happening. It's happening already, but it's going to be getting more and more like that. It's been that way in most countries that have gone with this far left turn in terms of politics. And that brings me to the next point, which is looking after your children, being careful with them, being careful what they're being fed in school, how they're being poisoned, the brainwashing in school. We've talked about that before. It's something that you shouldn't be looking after your kids nonetheless, but it will become particularly important now with the new set of politics that you're likely to end, or that your son or daughter is likely to end up having to deal with. The propaganda is typical of socialist governments. They make a big deal out of it, especially in some of the early stages, some of the younger ages, even in kindergarten, in primary school. In the United States, maybe people associate that more with university, college being the place where all of this political propaganda is spread. But typically, socialist governments, they start from a very early age. Once they have access to that on a state level, on a federal level, if they can influence that, they're going to be doing it as much as they can. And it's particularly important for you to look at your kids' homework, have those conversations. But you spending time with your kids, asking them about their day, what is it that their teacher said, and going through their homework. What is it exactly? Guys, I'm not kidding. Your kids' homework may contain hidden propaganda that you want to talk about with your kids. Again, this should be a huge topic in its own. I could talk about this for hours, but it's not just about sheltering them from. I know people that have gone the homeschool way, have done the homeschool thing, and it's great. And for some people it works, for other people it doesn't. But sheltering your kids is fine, but I think it's even better rather than sheltering from the entire world, which is basically impossible. You teach your kids well so as to know how to identify all of these things. Have these conversations. Look at what he's telling you when he's saying this. Look at what your teacher is trying to do when he implies or suggests this game or this activity. You see what he's doing. You see the mental games he's playing. Your kid, as he starts getting older, he'll learn to identify these things, and that's a lot better than just protecting him and just keeping him away from all of this, because eventually he will have to go out there and deal with the world as it is. At least that's my take on it. I want to go through this because if not, it's going to be a super long video. Start your own business, any kind of business that you can, any activity that you enjoy doing, any profession that you have. Maybe you're working for someone else, but have something of your own. This is a big one because it's the way in which a lot of people have managed to deal, especially with the economic aspect. As we were talking about before, the economy is not going to be getting better anytime soon. It's actually very likely to get a lot worse than it already is. And if you think it's okay now, fantastic. Believe me, trust me on this one. Communists destroy economies every time they get into government. You have already a government that's gonna be going a certain way, and it never ends up well. With socialists, the type of people that Biden is bringing along with him, he's like a Trojan horse for socialism in the American government. They're going to be doing this, and it's not going to be good for you. It's not going maybe some of the elites that align with them and play nice and such are going to be doing even better than before. They're going to be making tons of money on this. That's usually the case when the elite is smart about it and they align with the commies in power. They make a fortune out of it, even more than they already have. For middle class, lower class, but especially for middle class, it's going to be bad. For anyone that's already struggling, anyone that's poor, man, that is a disaster. But this point about having your own business, it just gives you something else to supplement or work on if you end up losing your job, or if it's just not enough anymore. This is a big something that made a huge difference for a lot of folks in Argentina when unemployment reached 25%. There was just no jobs around, and this was a lifesaver for many, and something that a lot of people wish they have gotten starting on way earlier, years before they need it desperately so as to live on it. All right. The next point, I think it is point number 7. Become harder, become tougher mentally, especially become tougher, stronger, become less whiny, be less of a bitch regarding life in general. People tend to be a lot softer than they like to admit, and you see little things. You see people complaining about things that are not even in the radar for lots of folks in the third world, or in countries that struggle with a lot of this stuff. Some of the things that people in developed countries complain about seems completely ridiculous. Talking about things that small details about being obsessed with stuff that you buy or stuff that you have, becoming very picky regarding what is available for you or not, becoming very picky about stuff getting done in time or getting done at all. Becoming harder and more resilient in general, it's going to be needed as time become tougher themselves. You have to become a stronger, more, someone that's capable of enduring more hardship than before, because that's what you're going to be looking at. And this happens naturally, but especially at first, if this isn't something that you are already trying to mentally adjust to, it becomes even more difficult. People in South America, people in Africa, people in third world countries, in hellhole places, as years go by, they naturally become like this because you adapt. That's what naturally happens when a person is in a certain environment. 10 years later, 20 years later, or even your kids that grew up in that, they're going to be a lot tougher. They're going to be a lot stronger, especially mentally. Resilient, less whiny, and more capable of dealing with it and rolling with the punches as they come. But it's going to be better if you make that mental effort of trying to be that. Become more used to discomfort. Don't be a whiny or complain about not having the AC exactly at 21 or 20 or whatever degree it is. Become and anything that you can do so as to make yourself comfortable with discomfort. That's going to be building up that kind of mental attitude, I guess. Following point: staying healthy in all aspects, mentally, physically. Try to stay in shape. At least look after yourself. I've talked about this many times. It makes a big difference if you are. This is not my specialty. I'm not any way an expert in this, but eating well, doing a minimum amount of exercise, cardiovascular exercise, weight lifting, building a little bit of muscle mass, and basically trying to stay in shape. That's going to be a big one. But also, the mental health. How well are you with yourself? Are you happy with yourself, with your life? Are you okay with your wife, or with your husband, with your family, with your kids? Do you fight a lot? Do you have problems among yourselves? Are you about to get a divorce because the marriage is not going well? These are all things that are going to be stressed a lot more in these times. It happens a lot. I mean, it's a classic. Anything going through your marriage is not all that well. A bad economy, losing your job, likely to end up in a divorce. So you have to work on this. Like you work on everything else, you have to work on your family, your relationship with your wife, with your husband, with your kids. Those connections matter. And again, this is a huge topic on its own, but as time goes by, your family becomes your main tribe, your main team. I was reading the book from that we're going to be talking about with Matt tomorrow, Concrete Jungle. The author talks about his having your A team. Well, your family is your main A team. That's your main team, and it may not seem like it at first, but believe me, eventually your kids grow up, they become adults themselves, and they're going to be part of that team, and a very important part. So make sure your family, besides teaching your kids skills, make sure your family is healthy. Okay, that you trust one another, that you can count on one another, because that's likely to be the main people you can trust and that will have your back. Family is always going to be stronger than any average guy that you come across in life, any friend that you make. At least that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be, and it's going to be that way if you make that effort. If not, like many other families, you just fall apart. It's also very common as well. But I think it's important to make that effort. Number 9, moving to a state that reflects your values and it's likely to have your back in these trying times. This is one of the topics we've been talking about a lot with Matt, moving from those blue states to red states for all these reasons. So as to be surrounded, none of this is perfect, none of this is exact science, but you're a lot more likely to be surrounded by like-minded people in states that are, you're going to be moving to Texas. You're a lot more likely to be surrounded by like-minded people than living in the middle of LA. Living in a very blue state, in very blue cities in particular. But not only cities, but even in general, a place where it's a Democrat stronghold, you're very likely to be surrounded by Democrats, by people that voted for this and thought this was a good idea. And maybe that's going to be the way it is in school. Maybe that's going to be the way it is in your job, in your office, or whatever it is that you work. And that's going to be making life difficult for you. If you ever have to defend yourself, you're going to be tried and you're going to be judged by peers that are of that mentality. Not something you're going to be looking forward to. So this point, I think, is number 9, moving to a red state, to a more conservative state, is definitely something they want to do. Finally, last point is be ready to bug out of everything. Be ready to bug out entirely if it ever comes down to that. And I wrote my second book is a book entirely written about bugging out and relocating, because eventually that's what I had to do. Eventually that's what people in Venezuela had to do. That's what people in South Africa had to do. That's what people in the Balkans had to do as well. And the more I talk with people that have lived through things like these, there's a chance that it may end up happening. Now, I'm not saying that you have to run out of the United States. Again, a huge topic on its own. What I'm saying is at least have an idea of make that, role play that. What is it I would do if I have to leave? I talked about this many times, but it's something that you should at least consider. I don't think it's going to be something, I think it's more about moving states. I think that's where it's really at. But I wouldn't be honest if I didn't talk about the final solution to something like this, which is when a country really becomes a hellhole, when a country, and we don't know. I mean, there's people that have been talking about civil war. We've talked about this with Matt many times, how likely it is to happen. Some people think that it's very likely to happen. And would you want to be in a country that's going through a civil war? You may think you would. Maybe you change your mind when you actually go through one, or when you see the initial stages of one. Maybe that changes your mind. What I know for a fact is that it's a lot easier to make that jump if you finally decided to do that, if you already had an idea of how you would do it. This is the kind of thing that not a lot of people have a lot of experience in. I do, because I actually did this. And what I mean by that is I at least did it once. You will be hard pressed finding people that were living in a country that became a socialist crappy hellhole, moved somewhere else, and that also became a horrible hellhole and had to bug out of that as well. That's likely the thing, that if you ever had to do that, you maybe did it once, because it really got that bad because of war, because of one of these things happening. But even if you do it just once, it really does give you a whole different perspective of how you go about it. And especially talking with other people that have gone through it, you see the similarities. You see how we think alike. I never thought I had to do this, but you know what? It got to that point that I had to do it. I never wish I had done it. I never wish I had been put in that position to finally have to do it. But it became that. That ended up happening. And you know what? I'm a lot better off for doing it than sticking there and losing your life, losing your family, losing a loved one. If it gets to that point, this is the kind of thing that a lot of people end up regretting not doing in time. So again, not saying run out of the United States. I'm getting emails pretty much all the time about people that are actually considering or moving forward with their plans of leaving the United States because of what's been happening. Very personal. I would be the last person to judge someone for deciding that, but I can tell you that it's already happening. I'm not saying do it. I'm saying at least have a plan. Folks, that's going to be all for now. I hope this wasn't too long, but I think it was stuff that's going to be giving you valuable information so as to prepare for it's going to be happening in the not so distant future. A lot of this already happening already. Guys, see you on our next video. Have an awesome day.